Hello everyone, this is Nathan, and for this week's discussion brought by Historical Scholarship, I want to talk about the sources I was able to find through the Oxford Scholarship and Project Muse about American Protestant missionaries to the Korean Peninsula in the early 20th century. Now, for context, it's important to recognize that the Korean Peninsula was heavily isolated to foreign intervention. They did not like the West, and that they did not like foreigners at all, especially to missionaries that try to proselytize their people. There are already some Christian groups, but they were facing heavy persecution. Korea eventually had to open up by force, not only from the West, but especially by their neighboring country, which was Japan. And the royal family at the time, which was under the reign of King Gojong, this was the final royal family, and they did whatever they can to hold on to the little power they had. They still had a lot of influence over the Korean people, and that plays an important role later as we talk about it in this video. But he had very little power. And the Japanese were able to install pro-Japanese cabinet members to his royal court. And so the king had nobody else to turn to and trust in his royal court. And it was through that the American missionaries were able to gain a foothold and the trust and relationship with the king to eventually be able to influence the Korean people. Tae-young-roo writes this in the Journal of Church and State that the king, who was later known as the Emperor of Korea when the country became the Korean Empire in 1900, was very skeptical of missionaries. Yet he found them to be the most sympathetic and kind, especially against the pro-Japanese cabinet members. When Queen Min, his wife, was assassinated in 1895 by Japanese assailants, the Japanese were slowly able to gain control of the peninsula, especially through installing their puppet members in his cabinet. And so the king could no longer trust people in his courts. He could not trust anybody. He thought he himself would be poisoned and assassinated. Yet it was through the physicians and diplomats that were really missionaries that were on his royal court that he was able to trust and develop a relationship with it. He would even use some of them to send out secret messages to outside groups that were for the Korean cause. So that's very interesting to note. One was Horace Allen Newton, who was a Presbyterian physician who later was assigned as a U.S. ambassador to Korea. Chung Young writes this in his journal, The American Missionary Movement in Korea, 1882 to 1945, that the emperor first asked if Horace Allen was a missionary to the U.S. First Minister, in which he responded, he is not, he's a physician. The king was very happy about it, and he would eventually be able to develop a trustworthy relationship with Allen, because Allen was very sympathetic and kind and was able to introduce important things. And he was also able to help his most trusted cabinet members that are still there to be able to recover in their health, especially during a suspicious period of time. And so it was through that close relationship with the emperor that Allen was able to pave the way to introduce Presbyterianism to the Korean people. Donald N. Clark wrote this in the University of Press of Korean Studies about Protestant missionaries in the March 1st movement, which was an Independence Day for Korea on March 1st, 1919. And so thousands of Koreans all over the country were trying to stand up. Unfortunately, they were brutally oppressed by the Japanese Empire. This was also a time when prior to this, he was writing about prior to this period of time from 1900 to 1919, that the Christianity itself had expanded significantly to the missionaries that are able to gain a foothold through their relationship with the royal court and with the Korean people. The American missionaries were not Japanese. And this is important because the Japanese army was very brutal to the Korean people, yet the American missionaries were very sympathetic and kind. And they were also, able to help the Korean people in times of turmoil and difficulty, economic, physical, etc., all of that. And so the Korean people were very appreciative of this sympathetic spirit by the American missionaries. And the largest growth of Christianity was seen at Pyongyang, which is unfortunately in North Korea today. And so, it's interesting to note that through these academic scholarship databases and other journals, I was able to find some interesting facts about how Korean missionary work began, mostly how they were able to connect with the royal family and use that influence to eventually allow Christianity to grow in the Korean peninsula during the early 1900s.